I'm Jem. You've tuned into my live video podcast. But first, a word from our sponsor, Hotbox Vintage.
Hi, I'm Delilah, and I own Hotbox Vintage in South Pasadena, California. At Hotbox, our goal is curating vintage pieces that you can't live without. Our collection includes everything from the 1940s to even the early 2000s. What excites us is eclectic and unconventional style, since there's no one-size-fits-all approach to fashion. Hotbox is priced for accessibility so that literally anyone can discover some vintage gems of their own. Plus, it's sustainable. Find us on Instagram and use code RAGHOUSE at checkout for 20% off your first order at hotboxvintage.com.
20% off. That's a good discount. I'm back. You're watching episode 8 of my Life of Jem live video podcast based on my blog of the same name. That's on Blogspot. But the easy way to find me is on my Life of Jem Facebook page. You can get the live stream, you can get my most recent blogs, and you can also watch the recorded versions of this video podcast on YouTube. We're also going to be coming out with an audio version of this, so stay tuned for that. And if you want a podcast, a video one, contact my rock star producer, April Duran. She's the cat's meow. Meow. And you can also find her on Rag House Media. We have a special writing episode for you today. It's about memoir, specifically about writing your memories. I call this episode Memory Box, and I'm going to read a story of that same name that's about my father. Then we're going to have a call-in interview of Liz Gonzalez. She's a writer and educator. She lives in Long Beach, but she's from the Inland Empire, specifically from San Bernardino, my neck of the woods. She's a great friend of mine, and we've done readings together. She's even helped me to edit my own memoir. She's such an inspiration to me, and she's been a great mentor, and you're going to hear more about her after my story. This story is called Memory Box, and it's a love letter to my father. So here we go. Memory Box. My father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer right before Christmas in 2005. My dad, John William Mance Jr., died only 3 weeks later on January 14th, 2006. Dad was born in 1936 in Anaconda, Montana. His family was dirt poor. My grandfather was a Yugoslavian German miner, and his mother was a Scottish English cook. When my dad was 5, him, his little sister, and his little brother were put into an orphanage. Their family couldn't afford to feed them. My dad and his siblings were returned to their parents after a few years. But due to his time in the orphanage, my dad never felt he had enough. He was obsessed with food. He bought so much food that it spoiled, and he used to gag at the sight of white rice. He said it reminded him of his time in the orphanage. A chronic insomniac, my father would slice ham in the middle of the night. The sound of the slicer used to wake me up. My mom and dad met at a bar in Portland, Oregon. The bar was called Elsie's. 1969 was the year. My mom loved cowboys, and my dad always wore a cowboy shirt and his Big John belt buckle along with his Stetson. And my dad loved fiery women, and my Mexican mother met his criteria. They had both been married before. They moved in mere months after they met. My mom brought her son David, who was deaf. She had come to Oregon to enroll him in a deaf school. From the very beginning, my mom and dad had crazy passionate fights. My mom told me a story once about how they went to a party, got a little drunk, and my dad knocked my mom's wig off her head. Then tragedy struck. My dad and mom had to deal with the loss of my mom's son David, who was hit by a car. He died instantly. In March of 1970, my parents moved to Great Falls, Montana. My twin sister and I were born a year later. I have pictures where my dad is holding us and we're dressed in identical snowsuits. My mom pulled out a memory box recently. as I was writing this story, in fact, I opened up that black, cracked leather box, and out fell a letter. It was in my dad's cursive handwriting. The letter was addressed to his father, and it was dated 1969. It talked about how much he wanted to move to Great Falls, Montana, to be closer to his daughters from his first marriage, Barbara and Roberta, and how much he missed them. I read the letter written to a grandfather that I never knew, and I could almost hear my father's voice, as if he was whispering in my ear while I read the letter. That's my story. Memory box. I know it's a little sad. It's a little melancholy. Now let me introduce Liz Gonzalez, who we're going to call, but her bio is amazing. It's going to take me a little while to get through this, so I want you all to listen about this guest we have on. Liz Gonzalez is the author of the book Dancing in the Santa Ana Winds, Poems y Cuentos, and it was published by Los Nietos Press. Her creative nonfiction, poetry, and fiction will appear in, or have appeared in, Poets and Writers, the International Literary Quarterly, Voices de la Luna, Askew Poetry Journal, Inlandia, A Literary Journey, and the San Francisco Chronicle. Her awards include an Arts Council for Long Beach Professional Artist Fellowship, an Irvine Fellowship at the Lucas Artist Residency Program, an Elizabeth George Foundation Artistic Grant, and she's done residencies at Kimmel Harding Nelson Center for the Arts and at Hedgebrook. She is the founder and director of Uptown Words and Arts, which promotes literature and the arts. She teaches creative writing at the UCLA Extension Writers Program. She is a fourth-generation Southern Californian. Liz grew up in San Bernardino Valley, and currently Liz lives in Long Beach. She lives in Long Beach with an indifferent Chihuahua, a talkative Tortie cat, and her husband, Jorge Martin, a scientist and musician. Her current focus right now in writing is writing about the unheard history of the experiences and contributions of Mexican immigrants and Mexican Americans through her family's stories, such as her maternal grandfather's experiences growing up as a Mexican immigrant in the Midwest, and her maternal grandmother's experiences growing up as Mexican American in San Bernardino, California. Both of these in the early 1900s. I am proud to call her my friend. Let's call Liz.
Hello.
Hi, this is Jem. Is this Liz?
Yes, it is. Hi.
Hi, Liz. How are you? I can hear some noise in the background. Can you turn down?
Yeah, I was going to turn it down when she stopped. So, okay. All right.
Great. How are you doing, Liz?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm great. It's so nice to hear your voice. I just introduced you. You have such a fantastic biography. But why don't you tell my viewers how you got into writing?
Well, I love to tell this story. I began writing creatively under protest in 1991 when I was an undergrad at CSU Los Angeles. Blue Palm, the internationally renowned performance art duo, accepted me into the performance art collaborative workshop that was to culminate in performances for public audiences. To my surprise, I was one of the few workshop members they assigned to write and perform an autobiographical monologue.
Wow.
And at that time, I had no interest in creative writing. I hated writing essays for assignments. So I wasn't happy about it. But because it was such an honor, I reluctantly accepted the assignment
And during the writing process, I realized that I loved creative writing, and I found my voice.
How inspiring, Liz. And I think that just goes to the power of saying yes. Sometimes we get asked to do things, and it's really the universe trying to introduce something to us. So what was that first autobiographical essay or performance piece that you wrote about? What did you talk about in that, if you can remember?
Yes, I remember. It was called Effing Guys and Their Effing Dicks. And it was about the different ways I dressed to attract and meet different types of guys.
How old were you back then?
I think I was about 30, 31. I was a late bloomer.
What a great story. Because we all do that.
By the audiences.
What'd they do? Did they stand up?
Yeah. No, I don't. Well, I don't remember that. I just remember there was a long line of people to talk to me that wanted to talk to me after the. Because we had several performances, and there was just a lot of positive response, and the crowd, the applause went on for a bit. So it was very exciting.
Well, and I've seen Liz perform many times. I also forgot to say that Liz Gonzalez and I are both Macondistas. And do you want to talk about Macondo a little bit, Liz? How did you start with Macondo? And Macondo is a collective that was started by Sandra Cisneros for writers who want to change the world and who have a social justice bent.
Yes, it's for socially engaged writers. And at the time, I've been a member since 2006. And at that time, you had to be nominated. You had to be referred. And so I was referred by another Macondista, Leslie Larson. And she's been going since it was, the meetings were held in Sandra's kitchen with Carla Trujillo, her partner, her life partner. So,
and just for people who don't know, Sandra Cisneros is the acclaimed Latina writer who wrote House on Mango Street, Carmelo. She wrote so many books. I mean, so many books and poetry collections. She's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she is. And so, she's not involved. She hasn't been involved with it for quite some time, but she's still very supportive of it.
Yes, definitely. And when we're talking nonfiction memoir, because today we're talking about writing your memories, I always tell people to trigger their memories if they can. What do you use to trigger yours? I use music.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a lot of ideas that I want to write about. I'm not going to be able to write them off probably in my lifetime, and topics I want to explore. So I don't trigger or give myself prompts to write about, but I have some natural triggers, which are, I'll hear a song that'll bring back a memory or make me think of somebody or a place, and then I'll explore that in writing, or I'll go to a place that has the same effect. Or sometimes I'll be doing an activity like working in my garden, and I'll want to know more information about cactus or some plant, and I'll research it. And I do use photos and information about places and activities and specific times to enrich my work. And
well, especially right now, right? Just real quick, you're working on some historical research. Is that right? About your grandparents?
Yes. Right now, I'm working on 2 historical creative nonfiction book projects that might end up becoming one book. And one is about my maternal grandmother's experiences growing up as a Mexican-American in San Bernardino, California.
Wow.
And it's based on her oral history that I recorded in the 90s and into 2000. And the other one is about my maternal grandfather's experiences growing up in the Midwest as a Mexican immigrant. And that during the early 1900s, both are set in the early 1900s. And that is based on his memoir, his unpublished memoir that he wrote.
Oh, So in both of them, you have a recorded history of your grandmother, and then for your paternal grandfather, you have his writing. Is that right?
Maternal. They're my mom's parents.
Okay. So for your maternal grandmother, you recorded a history from her, and then from your maternal grandfather, you have a memoir that you're working from that he wrote. How fascinating.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so how do you use that? Like, are you using it as a source? Are you using passages? Are you rewriting it? Like, how do you work with someone else's words?
I think that the thing is that it's important that it is my grandparents. I'm not ghostwriting or something like that. So, working with someone else's words is a little bit different. And a lot of it has been the research that I've done with my grandmother. She passed away in 2009. And then a little bit before that, she wasn't doing so well. But before that, I used to write pieces based on the stories that she told me, and then I would read them to her, and she always gave me her approval, and then she would remember things and say, she would add stuff to it, and so that was nice because I worked with her, and with my grandfather. He died before I was even writing. So, it's been a long process because I have a chronic illness, and so I've been sick. So it's been a long process. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was thinking I was going to make my grandmother's book into a novel, but now I like mixing her passages with actual history from the research that I find.
Oh, for sure.
So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, Andrew Pham, who I took a class with, he wrote Catfish and Mandela. He taught at Vona. And he wrote in his father's voice about his father growing up in Vietnam, and it's called Eves of Heaven. And that book taught me that you can write your family history, your family members' histories in their voice if you want, or you could do it in third person. I like first person personally. But let's talk about Dancing in the Santa Ana Winds. That's a mix of poems and stories, right? But mostly nonfiction stories.
Poems, mostly nonfiction, and a few fiction pieces that I wrote over since I started writing. After the monologue, when I started writing poetry. So it's a collection.
And they can find that on Los Nietos Press?
Well, they can find it at Los Nietos Press, LOSNIETOS Press, and that's easy to find on the internet. But also, I have a link to it on my page, Liz Gonzalez, all Z's, no S, LizGonzalez.com. Real easy. And there's a page that says book, and you can go on there, and there's a link to Los Nietos Press.
Yes, and her book, Liz, your book, Dancing in the Santa Ana Winds, I reviewed it on my blog. It's one of my favorite books. The Inland Empire, especially San Bernardino, plays a crucial role in your book, and let's talk about that. How does the Inland Empire factor in as a character in your writing? Is it a character? I don't want to assume it is.
I hadn't thought of it as a character, but it definitely is. It plays a large role, and I love being from the San Bernardino Valley. I'm a fourth generation San Bernardinian. Wow. My maternal grandmother was born there, and her mother came to San Bernardino when she was a child and grew up there. And so, I have so much family history there. My experience is so rich there. So just naturally, since I write, personal work, it naturally fell in. And then after the terrorist shooting in San Bernardino in 2015, it became more purposeful to write about it because there was so much negative press about the area and the people, and I wanted to counter that and show how wonderful San Bernardino is.
Well, definitely. Liz, do you remember the reading that you organized at Beyond Baroque, that was about kind of
Yes.
combating that narrative of the Inland Empire and specifically San Bernardino as a negative place. And I think it's so important that writers like us who are from here, you know, I was born in Great Falls, Montana, but I consider myself a native Inland Empire girl. I mean, I came to Montclair when I was 3 or 4, and I came to Ontario when I was 5. So I'm from here, you know. I claim this city as my own. And I know you do too, Liz. You're very proud of our city.
Mm-hmm. And the Inland Empire, because I've lived in different parts of the Inland Empire. The San Bernardino Valley, but I'm proud of the whole, you know, I spent a lot of time out there. I visited different areas throughout the Inland Empire. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
You have the deserts, the mountains.
We have everything. I mean, I lived in Upland. I lived in Pomona, which is adjacent. I lived in Ontario. We both lived in Rialto. I live in San Bernardino now. And does your family still live in the Inland Empire, Liz?
Yes. They all live in the Inland Empire. My immediate family does, and many of my extended family do too.
And I have to say, I thought I knew the best Mexican restaurant in the Inland Empire. And Liz, what's the one you took me to in San Bernardino? What's that one called?
Mitla on Mount Vernon in the West Side, where my grandma grew up.
What's it called?
That's a great place. Mitla, M-I-T-L-A.
Mitla.
Mitla.
La Mitla. That place is so good. Liz introduced me to it, and I have to say, and when Liz did her reading of her book, Liz, when you did your reading of Dancing in the Santa Ana Winds, didn't you do that at the train depot in San Bernardino? I was there, I remember.
I did. Yes, I did it at the museum there, which is in the baggage room. And my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was a supervisor in the baggage room and retired from Santa Fe. So that was very special to be able to have the event there. Yeah. And thank you for being a part of it.
Oh, it was so fun. And I have to say, I was amazed at this museum and at this hidden treasure in San Bernardino, this railroad museum. And I'm not a railroad nut, like I'm not into trains or anything, but it was a cool museum. They had these mannequins. They had all this historical documents and just all this cool stuff. So do you want to do a quick read of something, Liz, so we can get a flavor of your prose or whatever you want to read, whether you want to read a poem or prose, it's up to you.
Sure. I also wanted to say the architecture of the Santa Fe depot is wonderful, too. I'll go ahead and read an excerpt from a piece in my book, Dancing in the Santa Ana Winds, Poems y Cuentos, New and Selected. And if you want to find out how it ends, I invite you to please consider buying my book. And again, you can find the information on LizGonzalez.com, LizGonzalez.com. The Mexican Jesus sings lead tenor in the Our Lady of Guadalupe teen choir. The Mexican Jesus is a guy at my church who has dulce de leche skin and looks like the Christ statue flocked with white lilies on Easter morning. The Mexican Jesus, blue-black, just washed, resurrected Christ hair hangs free. Grandma says, it's disgraceful. That boy comes to God's house all grenudo. He should at least pull it back in a ponytail. I point to the long-locked effigy stretched out on the bronze cross floating above the altar and whisper, what about him? She digs her fingernails into my thigh and hisses, cállate los hocico, diablita. I don't care what she thinks of me. She just insulted my maybe future boyfriend. The Mexican Jesus is a junior at San Bernardino High and makes straight B's. When he graduates, he's going to take classes at the local JC. Patty, my best friend, told me so. The Mexican Jesus is too old for me. I'm 13 going on 14, but I joined the choir for the summer anyway, to be close to him. Mama even lets me take the bus by myself from the bench to the west side for rehearsals. Otherwise, I'll lie on my stale sheets all day, eating watermelon and running the water cooler. The choir is the answer to her prayers. The Mexican Jesus doesn't pay attention to Bridget, Patty's 16-year-old sister, who has sparkly eyes for him. She keeps her mean eye on me. She's jealous of me ever since the night she thought the cutest boy at the Tomorrowland dance crossed the floor to take her hand, but asked for mine instead. The Mexican Jesus comes to every rehearsal. So do I. The choir rehearses twice a week and sings at the Saturday evening and Sunday afternoon masses. This is more church than I'm used to, though I don't feel more holy. The Mexican Jesus stands in front of me in the choir. When he sings his solo, his arms and bony body tremble like he's walking on water. His head nods up and down fast, making his long hair ripple and swing. He belts out, "Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world." And I imagine combing his wet hair with my fingers after he steps out of the public pool, his locks spilling into my open hands, splashing my face like a waterfall. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Round of applause. Masterful. You know that is one of my favorite pieces of yours. And I think for us writers out there who are listening, it's really a masterful use of the I, of writing in first person, capturing that nostalgia, that young adult voice. It's hard to do. You make it seem easy, Liz. Like how do you get yourself, because I write that same perspective sometimes. How do you get yourself back to your teenage self? Do you eat a lot of Cheetos or Ruffle sandwiches with mayonnaise?
Well, that piece actually transcribed itself to me. And that was a rare occurrence. I had started it in the poet Ray Gonzalez's workshop years before. And one day I was working on my grandmother's, working on a piece about my grandmother. And when I was getting ready to turn everything off, I had stopped for the day, and all of a sudden it started dictating itself to me. And I couldn't type fast enough to capture it. But usually what I do is I just imagine myself. I put myself back in the place and time and just imagine myself. I might free write to add to that and look at photographs. Sometimes they might not be my own. I'll look up photographs online of the space and time. If it happened to be also if the event like the US Festival, has been captured in photographs and filmed.
And you were there, right? Weren't you at the US Festival?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Both US Festival.
Bowie, In Excess, U2. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I think it was held right by where I live now in Glen Helen. Is that right?
Yes, it was. It was wonderful.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
It was wonderful when tickets were cheap.
$12 or something probably. But I think it's really important, those little details that you use, like the word Tomorrowland dance. Like anyone that grew up in like the 80s, we know what you mean by that, right? And I just love that piece. And that's only happened to me a couple times as well, where it dictated itself to me. My story about my grandpa's house. I read a piece in the New Yorker about a woman who inherited something, and it triggered a memory of my mom, how her dad left her everything, and she split it up between her brothers and sisters. And I sat down in my mother-in-law's house in Hesperia, and I wrote the story from beginning to end in 1 hour. And that has never happened to me since. And there's something magical about that. It's almost like your muse. It's something otherworldly. It's what Stephen King calls kind of the magic of it, right? That you have to get to your subconscious to really find that creative voice that is inside all of us, right? Our memories, they're here, right? What do you think about that?
About the magic, or?
Yeah, the magic. Like how it dictated itself to you. That's magic, right?
Yes. But I also think, I believe that fate happens to those who are prepared for it. And because I was writing regularly and working, I think that helped, although it hasn't happened again. I have had, though, where, lines come to me or sentences come to me as I'm doing things, gardening or cleaning house or whatever, and an image will appear to me when I'm trying to revise my work, and I can't think of what it, I can't think of what's the right word, what do I need there, and then it'll come to me, and that feels magical as well. But like you said, that reading triggered it, and I think reading also helps a lot. Reading and writing regularly helps keep you in the mode to receive.
Yeah, you got to put your culo in the chair, right? You got to put your butt in the chair and do the work, and then it will come to you. But if you're not sitting there writing and you're doing something else, like watching Gilmore Girls for 6 hours sometimes, or, doing like running around and going to Target and doing all these other things to get out of writing. If you don't actually sit your culo in the chair, then you're not going to get the magic, right? You have to do the work. And I know you are a hard writer and a hard worker. So tell me what the hardest part of writing is for you. What is it?
Editing. Editing is hard, and that's hard because my chronic illness has impacted me in a way that it's hard for me to see errors. So editing at the sentence level, grammar, all of that, it's hard for me to catch things. So I can find it in other people's work, but it's hard for me to see it in my own. And I know that that's, people miss things, but I tend to miss more. Yeah. But, I do think that going to Target and taking a break, like, sometimes I hit a wall. It's like I can't take this any further. I need to stop for the day and, clean or take a walk or, just let it go. And then it continues to work on itself inside me. It's hard to explain, it's in my gut, I like to call it percolating, it percolates in the back of my mind and in my gut. And then I'm better for it the next day when I come back to the piece that I'm working on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that marinating, letting stuff sit, I actually put my memoir aside and let other people read it for, this for like 3 to 6 months. And now I'm back into it and I'm able to get into the thick of it. And I, too, have a hard time with these, especially the stories I wrote years ago, finding anything different or being able to edit it at all or finding the typos. So I think it is hard. And, you're really open about your chronic illness. And I think that's really important for people to realize that we all have our struggles and you can overcome these, and you're so accomplished with everything you're dealing with, I know it's not easy. So I admire that about you.
Well, thank you. Well, I love to write. I mean, I just can't imagine myself not writing. So I'm going to do it no matter what.
Yeah. And, those are the people who make it. People think you're never going to get rich writing for the most part. Most of us will not. But we do it because we don't have a choice. I mean, because I could easily just go to my law job every day, come home, and just chill out. And I can't. There's something about writing for me. It sustains me through everything else that we're dealing with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And tell us about teaching. So how for you is it teaching? You know, because a lot of people can do and can't teach, and a lot of people can teach and can't do. You can do both. So how do you teach creative writing? Like, what for you, what's your goal with your students? And, you know, I'm in an MFA program that I just started, and I went back and forth with Liz and with a lot of other of my close friends debating about whether I should do it. I'm happy I'm doing it, but a lot of the people are less experienced than me, and that's okay. But my teacher is fantastic, and I love that. So,
well, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, I'm happy right now, but I'm only in class 1. So when I'm at class 13, we'll see how I feel about it. And after I spent all this money. But I went to a very low cost program. That was something, you know, a lot of people recommended. I went to a low residency, low cost program at University of New Orleans online. But tell me about teaching creative writing. Like, how do you teach it? Because I've never really taught it.
Well, I teach at the UCLA Extension Writers Program, and I conduct workshops at community centers and different places, you know, for libraries and different spaces where the community gathers. And I think that for my main focus is for people to write and to get their ideas on the page, and to feel free to write about what they need to write about without worrying about an editor. Just let it go and get it down on the page. And then I like to share things I learned along the way from my teachers, like Sandra C. Snell, and just, you know, different things that I found that were helpful to me as a writer. And hopefully it might not speak to them directly, but it will plant a seed. And then they can say to themselves, you know, oh, okay, maybe I'll try this then. And it won't have anything to do with what I said, but it just helps them see their work in a different way, look at it from a different angle. And so I just want to be encouraging and get people to write. You know, I think for me, that's the biggest thing, and not to censor themselves.
100%. I can tell you a story about this. I think creating a safe space is everything with teaching creative writing. When I was just out of high school, you know, I dropped out, but I took my GED, and then I went back to junior college. And I went to Mount Sac, but I took one class at Chaffey that I ended up dropping. And the reason I dropped it at Chaffey College is because it was a creative writing class, and I wrote a fiction piece and I read a lot of Harlequin romance novels when I was little, like really little, so they're ingrained in me. So I wrote this very romantic story that was probably over the top, but I just remember seeing the red words, melodramatic. You are melodramatic. This is awful. And I did not write for years. I did not write till I went to Mount Sac and got on the newspaper. And then I started writing journalist stories. And that fiction, I still don't write fiction to this day, really. I wrote a couple of fiction pieces. But for me, I think maybe that's why I'm drawn to nonfiction. Because even though my life is melodramatic, it's true. My life was crazy, right? And it's the truth. The truth is always stranger than fiction. So no one can criticize me for that, right? This is my life. This is the life I've lived. So I think it's really important that, and I know you're a great teacher. Liz, where did we meet? Did we meet at Inlandia, or did we meet in Wrightwood years ago? I was trying to remember.
We met at the reading, or I'm pretty sure we met at the reading in the coffee house in Redmond, where we shared work related to I can't think of the right word, but it was to honor the shooting in 2015. And I had seen your work published in Inlandia, and so I was eager to meet you. But I think that's the first time we physically met.
I think you're right. And then we hung out at Wrightwood at the Wrightwood Literary Festival, which is a great festival in the Inland Empire. If anyone, hopefully it will happen next year as well. It's a great festival. We did that together. And I just have to say, Liz, not only are you a great writer, you're one of my favorite writers from the IE or from anywhere, but you also are just a great supporter of other women And my producer, April Duran, is similar in the fact that she tries to bring women up. And I think you're really good at mentoring other writers and other female writers, especially Latinas, and helping us kind of find our way, because it's not easy. It ain't easy, right? Writing is not easy.
No. Oh, thank you so much for saying that. Well, I mean, I love your work. I love you, and I really believe in what you're doing. And so, you know, I want you to see it through. So, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I think supporting each other is really important, because, like you say, it is hard, and the biz is hard. And in general, we just need to support each other.
Oh, yeah. And the best thing about writing, and what we don't always tell people, is that you meet the coolest people ever. Before I started writing, like as a gig, I thought that the coolest people were at the public defender's office. So hopefully none of my friends that there are watching. But I have to say, because the coolest people I've ever met are other writers. I've met Liz. I've met my friend Samuel. I met so many people that I just wholeheartedly admired, not just as writers, but as people, because there's something about the artistic integrity that writers have. Like, you feel it in your soul, right, Liz? I mean, we know this because we go to Macondo, and it's like so many great people. And I'm not exaggerating here. Writers are the coolest, and they like to drink too, which I like to drink. So how about you tell us more, Liz? We got a couple of minutes here about how people can find your work. You said on your website, and I will put a link to that on my blog and on my Life of Gem Facebook page. As soon as I get home or in the morning, I'll put the link there so everyone can find her book. And I would tell everyone to check out the press, the page. The press that published her book is a great press. Frank Kearns runs it, and he did a beautiful job with Liz's book. And the best thing about that book, Liz, is it kind of defies genre, because it's poems y cuentos, right? So it's poems and stories, and your stories are nonfiction and fiction. And people don't do that, right? I mean, David Sedaris writes memoir, and he calls it, you know, memoir-ish, some truth-ish sometimes. But you really do this merging of stories that the reader has to kind of figure out what's truth and what's fiction. And I love that. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. But there are collections with a combination of, I think that they're not published as often,
right,
as other collections, but there are collections of the mixed genres.
Yeah, and I love that. I mean, I don't know many. I'm trying to think of even one off the top of my head that I've read. I'm sure there are some like yours, but the thing about yours is it's rooted right here in the Inland Empire, right? And to have an Inland Empire writer who not only, you know, mixes genres, but, you know, you kind of cross borders. You live in Long Beach, but you come home to the IE. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I considered San Bernardino the Inland Empire home. So, and like I said, my immediate family still lives there, so I'm out there all the time. And then with my work that I'm doing, my historical book project based on my grandmother's life, I'm also out there for that. Not right now during COVID, but usually I'm out there all the time. So,
well, great.
And so my work, there's links to my work on lizgonzalez.com. I have links to work that's been published.
And what's coming out next? Do you have any pieces coming out soon?
I have some poems on that in that international paper, or that international site. It's actually, they call it Interlit, Interlitq. And I have some poems that are going to be coming out there. And I have a creative nonfiction piece that's going to be coming out. It's a personal essay that's about writing, actually, that's going to be coming out in Poets and Writers in the spring.
Wow. And I've seen a preview of that piece, and I have to say, everyone check out that piece. Look for it in the spring. Liz's story about writing is inspirational. Well, thank you, Liz. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to the listeners. Thank you very much, and it was so good to hear your voice and talk to you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we're going to go eat soon, as soon as we can. I swear.
Yes.
Mexican food, San Bernardino.
Yes.
Thank you, Liz. Tell your Chihuahua hello for me.
I will, Chacho. Okay.
Chacho.
And tell your doggies.
I will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Bye, Liz. Love ya.
Bye-bye. Love you too.
Wow, that was a good interview. She's such a great writer. She really is. Liz is one of my favorite people in the world, and she's a great writer. So everyone check out her website. I will put a link on my blog tomorrow, as well as on my Gem Facebook page. And I might even link to it in the comments. Do we have any questions or comments?
So I think it's really cute. Cindy Nessinger, she said that she actually was... let's see. She said she loves the title of Liz Gonzalez's book. And, I love this poem, Coming of Age, bravo. And she said, great reading, Liz. I danced at Tomorrowland, too. Isn't that cute?
Didn't we all?
Yeah, exactly. And then also Tracy and Jackie say hi.
Oh, hi, Trey. Hi, Jackie.
And Mary Camarillo says, great reading, Liz. Oh, no, actually, that was Mary Camarillo, excuse me, that said, great reading, Liz. I danced at Tomorrowland, too. So that was really cute. And then Jackie also said, stories are portable magic, Stephen King.
Wow.
So there you go. But
yes, and the book that Stephen King wrote about writing itself, which is part memoir, part how-to, is called On Writing. So anyone that wants a short treatise on how Stephen King got started and how he writes and how he reaches into his writer's consciousness, it's called On Writing by Stephen King. And the book by Liz is called Dancing in the Santa Ana Winds, Poems y Cuentos, New and Selected. And that's by Los Nietos Press. I can't say that word very well.
Nietos?
Nietos, Nietos, LOS, Nietos. .com, I think, is their website. So we're almost done here, but I'm going to tell you about my next podcast, which we're going to skip a couple weeks because it's my birthday in 2 weeks and I'm going to go party. So I will be back on October 21st. That is a Wednesday at 7 p.m. as usual. I have special guest Linda Hogan. Linda was in my writing group that I had for years called Tres Libras. We had 3 Libras. We all wrote memoir together for years. She's since moved up north, but she's going to be one of my special guests, either by phone or by Zoom. We haven't figured it out yet, but that will be episode 9. And my goal is to get to 10 episodes this year. So that will be on October 21st. And we haven't decided what we're going to be talking about yet, but Linda has a fascinating history. She just finished her memoir, and it has a lot of music from the 60s in it. So Linda is also, like me, an avid karaokeer. So maybe we'll even sing a song. I don't know. This could get wild and crazy. Vodka, beer. I might even have a beer. I've never drank and done this show, but I could have 1 beer, right? People do it. Just 1. My husband's like, no. Okay, thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you for watching. Take care. Live well. Love ya. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, April. Thank you, Raghouse Media. Bye, Chacho. Bye, Frodo. Bye, Chewbacca. Those are my ducks. Hi, Adrian.